So now we switch to the next presentation. We proceed with Vita. Vita will talk to us about the relations between proverbs, proverbial phrases, and beliefs in Lithuanian folklore.
So, hello to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizing committee for the colloquium. This is my first time at this event, and I am very grateful to be able to participate here. So it was mentioned, I am from the Institute of Lithuanian Literature and Folklore from Lithuania, and the main field of my research is mythology. In the field of paramiology, I'm quite recently, so this paper is my first attempt to do research in the proverbs. Nevertheless, I couldn't avoid some mythological interactions in it, and as one of Lithuanian proverbs says, you can not run away from yourself. So I will try to share my screen now. Okay, I think now it's okay. As it was mentioned, the topic of my presentation today is relations between proverbs, proverbial phrases, and beliefs in Lithuanian folklore. And I would like to start my presentation with its structure. First, I will briefly talk about the main genres of folklore which are important to this presentation. Then I will introduce the sources of the data of my research. Later on, I will briefly discuss the relations between proverbs and proverbial phrases and other folklore genres such as songs, legends, anecdotes, and riddles. Afterwards, I will focus on the main topic of this presentation, how some beliefs in Lithuanian culture become used as proverbs and proverbial phrases. And lastly, I will draw some conclusions. So proverbs are figurative statements of fixed form and generalizing character. They are often used as advice or precepts. Syntactically, they consist of complete sentences. And proverbial phrases describe typical features of certain persons, things, and situations, or contain traditional comparisons. It is quite difficult to draw a strict distinction between these two types of traditional expressions. Therefore, it has become a common practice in Lithuania to publish proverbs and proverbial phrases together. These phrases belong to short forms, which as the type of the verbal folklore are distinguished by their relative brevity and partly by manner of verbal expression. This type is not homogeneous at all because genres differ significantly in content, artistic features, and functions, although the length of these items is considered to be the distinguishing feature of this kind. Beliefs or superstitions, which I'm going to discuss in the second part of my presentation, also belong to the short forms. Now let's move to the data sources. The main source, which contains all Lithuanian paramiological folklore, is Cart Index in Lithuanian proverbs and proverbial phrases in the Institute of Lithuanian Literature and Folklore, and it was created in 1970-1990. It contains more than 200,000 texts. Additionally, there is an electronic compilation of proverbs and proverbial phrases which can be found on the internet. The Institute of Lithuanian Literature and Folklore started to develop this compilation in 1998, and 2 years ago it was started to be updating. Also, there is the publication, Lithuanian Proverbs and Proverbial Phrases. It is based on data from the Cart Index. The initial plan was to prepare a 5-volume collection, but as we see now, it was a naive ambition since the third volume, which was released last year, contains the main words only with the letter K. And in the next presentation, after this presentation, my colleague Dalia Zaikauskienė is going to tell in more detail about these proverbial data sources, especially about the electronic compilation of proverbs and proverbial phrases. And I want just to emphasize the last volume, which is the most important for this presentation, because all examples of proverbs and proverbial phrases, which I'm going to analyze, are taken only from the third volume. On the one hand, it can seem that the data is taken from a very small part of Lithuanian folklore, but on the other hand, this narrow section of the holiness of proverbial material shows how rich Lithuanian terminology is. Now I would like to focus on how proverbs correlate to the other folklore genres. The first example comes from a song. The proverbial phrase is, "One fell down like a cabbage from a stalk." And we can find a very similar phrase in this traditional Lithuanian song. You can see its fragment on the slide. And the one line from this fragment, highlighted line, sounds very similar to that proverbial phrase. "His head flew like a cabbage." The second example, "They are smiling like Cain and Abel on the moon." It has relation to the etiological legend. Here you can see a shortened version of this legend, and I will cite the extended one. A very long time ago, two brothers tended to sheep. One brother's name was Cain and the other Abel. They had a fight once. The Cain killed Abel. He then came back home with his sheep, and father asked, "Where is your brother Abel?" Cain answered, "I killed him." Then the father cursed the son. "After your death on the moon, you will carry your brother on your shoulders. From that time on, the moon has dark signs." The next example contains two expressions. "Has a tailor balded?" and "A tailor has arrived." And it is said about the food that is too salty. These two phrases are related to the following anecdote. Once a tailor was sewing and saw dinner being cooked. The lady of the house put salt. One daughter and another daughter also put salt. The tailor saw this and he put 5 more handfuls of salt. The food was ready. When the food was ready, it was so salty that no one could eat it. The lady of the house said, "I put in very little salt, so I do not know how I made it so salty." "Mother, you put and I added too," one daughter said. The another daughter responded, "I also put some." The tailor lost his patience and said, "I also put 5 handfuls." From that time on, one says, with tailor. The following case shows how close and related proverbs and riddles can be. The proverb says, "He who dresses others is naked himself." And the riddle is, "She who is naked dresses others." The answer is needle. Another expression says, "He was shooting at heels but hit a nose." And here is a very similar riddle. He was shooting at heels and hit a nose. And the answer is he farted, and the answer is very similar to the explanation of the proverbial phrase. Now, after we glanced over the interaction of proverbs and other folklore genres, we can move to the main part of this presentation, which focuses on the relations between proverbs, proverbial phrases, and beliefs. First of all, let's take a look at this complicated folklore genre. Thus, what are beliefs or superstitions? They are short folklore forms expressing the mythical worldviews, usually text of the mythological or magical character failing to meet the classification criteria of other folklore genres get attributed here. Some of these texts have typical syntactic and semantic structure pointing out the certain causality. Quite often, these texts contain taboos, warnings, and guesses. Beliefs or superstitions are closely related to mythological or belief legends and etiological or origin legends too. These legends are stereotypical storyline folk narratives about some extraordinary event or personal experience, which usually are related to the supernatural sphere. The extended narrative of the legend can explain the concrete short belief. Frequently, it is difficult to identify if the belief has originated from the legend or vice versa. For this reason, speaking about relations between proverbs, proverbial phrases, and beliefs, some legends texts are also used as illustrative material as they can reveal the explanations of beliefs in more details. We can distinguish several clusters depending on the usage and topics in which beliefs can be related to proverbs and proverbial phrases in Lithuanian folklore. The first cluster might be called predictions of the weather. It is quite abundant in proverbs, and there are quite many similar proverbial phrases about Christmas and Easter. You can see several of them here. One of them sounds swarms at Christmas, ice at Easter. And we can find a belief, which is very similar to the above mentioned proverbial phrases. If the Christmas is white, Easter will be green, and vice versa. Other predictions of the weather are related to a cat. By the way, animals are very frequent in such predictions. The proverbial phrase says, a cat is sitting on the stove and calling winter. And we have two beliefs which can explain this phrase. If the cat cuddles up by the stove, it will be very cold. Or before the cold hits, a cat gets into the stove where it is warmer. Also, there are two proverbs about cats and rainy weather. It is going to rain so heavily that cats will be mewing. Or one is indulging themselves like a cat before rainy weather. And similar belief says that a cat howls before a change in the weather. Another animal often mentioned in predictions of the weather is a bird called wagtail. The proverbial phrase is, a wagtail kicks the eyes away. And there are two beliefs which can explain the phrase. A flown back wagtail kicks the eyes away. And if a wagtail flies back on St. Joseph's Day, it pushes the ice away with its leg and the ice floats away. Also, there are several similar paremiologic expressions where the wagtail is mentioned. A wagtail brings shoes. A heron brings a wagtail under its wing, and no wagtail, no warmth. One more bird important for the predictions of the weather is swallow. There are two proverbial phrases related to a swallow and rain. One is chirping like a swallow chirps before rain, or one is whizzing like a swallow whizzes before rain. And similar beliefs are, if swallows flies near the ground and chirp, there will be rain. Or swallows measure the rain. If they fly from high up and again quickly down and up again, if they even poke the ground with their wing, you know there will be rain or even a storm. Or swallows fly low, there will be rain. Another cluster of proverbs and beliefs is related to maturity rites. There is a proverb which says that if you do not cry getting married, you will cry sitting in the corner. Here is a longer narrative which reveals a similar belief. When the bride hears others coming, she hides so that she does not see them. If she sees them, she cannot cry. And if she does not cry, women or some other strangers will wonder and start shouting, give here an onion, the bride has to rub her eyes with it. Crying in words was not in vogue anymore, but crying with tears was necessary when the bride was sitting down with her tribe. And a similar belief says, when you come into the church and you want to be sad, earlier crying was in vogue, it is said about the bride. Of course, you have to look at the St. Mary's altar first and not to the great one. If you look at the great one first, you won't cry. There are also several proverbial phrases related to maturity rites. One of them says, eat the end of the loaf and God will give you a son. And two similar beliefs sound like this. If you eat the end of the loaf, you will get a son. And if you eat the slice of the loaf, God will give you a daughter. If a girl often eats the ends of the loaves, God will give her more sons than daughters. Another proverbial phrase is about child's teeth. Godparents have been sitting apart, the baby's teeth are gapped. It was believed that godparents have to cuddle together while sitting at the table during baptism, and then baby's teeth will be thick, nicely grown without any gaps. Or godparents have to sit closely cuddled together when they are going to the ceremony, so the child's teeth grow thick. One more cluster of related proverbs and beliefs is connected with success, harmony, fortune, and wealth in Lithuanian worldview. A swallow is responsible for people's happiness. It is said, a swallow came back and brought happiness home. A swallow is back and quarrels in the house have gone. Quarrels at home drives a swallow out of its nest. One hates somebody like a swallow hates angry man. Several beliefs reveal this worldview further. If a swallow nests under a roof of some home, this home is happy. Thunder will bypass this home, there will now be fire or other misfortunes. Or if somebody builds a house and swallows immediately start to nest under the roof, this house will stand for long and will be happy. Unlike swallows, cats might not bring so much success. The proverb is, a black cat crossed the road. And everywhere in Europe, well-known belief says, if cat crosses a road for a man, some misfortune will happen to him. And the other belief, which reveals the similar worldview, says devil sits in black cats. And one more subject which is responsible for success in Proverbs is a mythological creature similar to a brownie, which is called kaukas in Lithuanian. We have 3 proverbial expressions with this creature. A brownie brings money, one brings everything home like a brownie, and you are rich, you must have a brownie. And there is a short narrative similar to a mythological legend which talks about a brownie. One farmer had a brownie, but I do not remember where he kept it. The brownie brought omnivorous wealth from everywhere. And the last cluster of related proverbs and beliefs where some features or characteristics of different animals rebel. The first case is with the cat. It is said, one is mumbling like cat, that is saying prayers. And there are 2 etiological legends related to this proverbial phrase. A cat asked God to let her kill man, and God answered, first say prayers, and then you can kill man. So the cat is saying prayers and cannot finish. The cat snuggles up to man and says prayers, and when she finishes prayers, she will kill man. But the cat never finishes her prayers. Or a newly created cat wanted to eat man. God told him to say prayers. Purring is his prayers, while saying them, he forgets to kill man. In the belief, the explanation is the opposite. A cat purrs because she is saying prayers for man. She is asking God to have a pity on man. There is one more proverbial phrase about the cat. One has 9 thoughts like a cat. And the related belief says, a cat wants to eat man, and she is thinking about this 9 times per day. But it does not have enough courage because she does not expect to eat the entire head at once. And one has to start with the head. One interesting proverbial phrase is about a swallow. One drowned themselves like a swallow drowned in the lake in autumn. This phrase is explained by such legends. Swallows spend winter in water. In autumn, they make such nests and they live under the water when it is icy. When the ice is gone and water comes freely, swallows come from the water and start to live. Or before the elevation of the Holy Cross, 3 days before, big swarms of swallows come to the lake. They are suffering there for 3 days. They fly around and chirp. At last, in 2 or 3, they dive to the lake from the reeds and they suffer for the sins of people for the whole winter. An important animal in Lithuanian worldview is a toad. It is said, one sucked out like a toad sucked out a cow. And there are many similar beliefs and mythological legends with this motive. Here are some examples just. People think a toad is a witch's helper, and if one catches it, it must be killed. Otherwise, it drinks or takes away cow's milk. Or toads suck out cow's milk. Or people think toads are witches and they need to be killed because they drink cow's milk. Other proverbial phrase talks about mole. One is afraid like a mole is afraid of the road. It is believed that if a mole crosses the road, it dies immediately. Or if a mole crosses a road, it bursts because it has not listened to God and did not make roads. The last belief reveals itself in the etiological legend. Once God invited all people and animals to fix a road. Everyone came and fixed it. Only a mole had not come. Thus the God asked him, "Why haven't you come to fix the road? What's the use of the road for me? I live under the ground and I dig my tunnels." God got very angry with the mole and said, "It is what you think. Beware. When you come up on the ground and you come to a road or a path, you will die on it." So even now, when a mole comes up on the road, it dies. Some think that the reason is the smell of human feet, but this is not true. And now we came to the conclusions. There is a certain degree of flexibility within some folklore genres, such as proverbs and proverbial phrases. The interaction between proverbs and other folklore genres can be twofold. In the first case, proverbs and proverbial phrases can be used in their own right or as a part of other folklore text. And we could see such cases with proverbs in the song, or when proverb and anecdote relates. In the second case, the same or very similar expressions may belong to different folklore genres. And similar cases was with proverbs and riddles, or proverbs and some beliefs. Sometimes it is obvious that one or another paremiological expression comes from another genre of folklore. Nevertheless, there are some cases where it is difficult to identify whether paremy came from another genre of folklore or vice versa. Different context, purpose, and function may determine the same expression, that the same expression belongs to different folklore genres. Without the context, it is sometimes difficult to identify to which folklore genre the text belongs. It is especially relevant for proverbs, proverbial phrases, and beliefs. The relations between beliefs, proverbs, and proverbial phrases expresses itself in two ways. In the first case, some beliefs have mutated to proverbial phrases and can be used in the same situations or similar situations, and this is quite obvious in the paremiologic predictions of the weather. In the second case, beliefs are not expressed as such in proverbs and proverbial phrases. However, the information related to beliefs is present in paremiologic phrases. And mythological worldview is clearly expressed in beliefs. Therefore, proverbs and proverbial phrases related to such beliefs also contain layers of mythological worldview. So thank you for your attention. And if there are any questions, I will try to answer them.
Thank you very much, Vita, for your interesting presentation. We had a question from Outi Lauakangas from Finland, which asked some questions about your database. But I suppose that the next presentation will answer those questions.